It's saying that South Africa has decided to play advocate for the devil and serve as the legal defense of Hamas.
Well, then address some of the points that South Africa has raised in its prosecution. I mean, one of the key ones is the statements by Mr. Netanyahu and other ministers. One that became very prominent yesterday was the invocation of the biblical reference of Amalek and the sort of the massacre that followed. I mean, why did Mr. Netanyahu invoke such a violent biblical tale?
Because
if not to prompt a genocide?
No, we are committed to destroying Hamas. We are committed to destroying the monsters who perpetrated the bloodiest massacre.
So why talk about Amalek?
Because it is a very powerful... I don't want to get into biblical exegesis here and start having a theological debate with you, because the Prime Minister knows exactly how that will be understood by the Israeli people, who clearly understand biblical references.
It would mean kill them all, which is what the Amalek story was about.
All of Hamas, because everyone in Israel understands who the enemy is. We've been very clear, in word and in deed, that the Palestinian people are not our enemy, and we hope to live alongside them in peace in a post-Hamas Gaza. But we are going to destroy the
But what happened in the biblical reference? It wasn't a searching for a minority of terrorists. It was killing everybody. And that is what's happening in Gaza.
The Prime Minister was referring to Hamas. The entire Israeli public understood he was referring to Hamas. The only people who don't seem to understand that are the journalists who clearly have less of a grasp of the book of Exodus than the Israeli public and the Prime Minister. We have been very clear, in both in word and in deed, the Palestinian people are not our enemy. We're going after Hamas because Hamas told us it wants to perpetrate more October 7th massacres.
Well, this is what you say.
It will if we don't. No, this is what Ghazi Hamad said.
There is a massive gulf between what you say and what you do, because you say you're going after Hamas,
this is not
but you kill civilians.
This is what... Krishnan, I wish we... Krishnan, war is awful. War is awful. We don't want this war. We didn't ask for this war. We didn't expect this war. Hamas declared war on us. Hamas declared war on us with an invasion by air, land and sea, and we are now fighting that war. And we are fighting a war because we want to end it. But we want to end it in a way that makes sure that Hamas cannot attack us again, as it tells us day and night that it wants to murder us again. We're fighting to bring back the hostages. We don't want this war, Christian. 350,000 people in reserves is 700,000 Israeli parents who are not sleeping tonight.
And there are many people who will accept that and understand that and accept the motivation, but it is the way that you are prosecuting that war that has led to this particular case in the International Court of Justice.
No, Christian. It's the fact that South Africa has chosen to align itself diplomatically with Hamas and Iran that means it is now acting as the legal arm of the Hamas terrorist organization.
Well, that again is clever rhetoric to basically say South Africa is a terrorist.
It is saying it's saying that South Africa has decided to play advocate for the devil and serve as the legal defense of Hamas. And yes, it has made itself criminally complicit with the Hamas rapist regime by giving it political and legal cover. Christian, what South Africa is doing here is not fighting racism, it's fighting pro bono on the side of the biggest racist, because it's telling Hamas, we are going to shield you from the consequences of the deadliest terror attack since 9/11. And you can keep going because the international community will tell Israel it has no right to defend itself.
How do you explain that video that was played in court yesterday of Israeli soldiers singing about Amalek and singing about the fact that there were no innocent civilians?
Question. And in every war, soldiers may perform things for social media that have absolutely nothing to do with the declared goals of this war, and everyone at every level understands.
But it revealed their goals.
But this goal, and again, you keep going back to this Amalek reference, refers to the destruction of Hamas. It refers to the destruction of the terrorist organization. It refers to the destruction of the terrorist organization.
But in that video, we see them chanting about their own innocence.
The Prime Minister has been clear, and the Defense Minister and the War Cabinet, and all those who make decisions, including the Chief of Staff and all the senior generals, that our war is a war against Hamas and not the Palestinian people.
So were those soldiers wrong? Was that chanting wrong? Had a senior officer or a politician come in, would they have said, stop that, that's wrong?
I'm not familiar with the particular video. I didn't watch
the video that was played in court yesterday.
I haven't watched that particular video. I was on a flight from Tel Aviv yesterday during the proceedings. But of course, if soldiers say things that are not in accordance with the military goals of the campaign, that is not acceptable. And the army has already disciplined soldiers on occasions when they have deviated from the discipline and the standards that we uphold.
So you accept that there could be soldiers who are deviating from your stated goals and killing civilians. Are there any investigations going on?
Christian, on cases where soldiers are believed to have acted in violation of the very very severe standards to which we hold ourselves. That is, of course, investigated. But that is
are
not
there
what
any
South Africa,
current investigations?
But notice that this is where we're taking the question now. It started with South Africa making a blanket and outrageous statement that cheapens the memory of the Holocaust by accusing Israel of genocide for fighting to bring back the hostages who are trapped in the terror dungeons. And now you're asking about whether there are occasional misdemeanors by soldiers who produce something not entirely appropriate for TikTok. And this shows just how spurious and specious
I'm not
South
talking
Africa's claim
about
is.
occasional misdemeanors. We're talking about more than 24,000 people killed.
Krishnan, the civilian casualties...
That's an extraordinary number of civilian casualties.
And it's tragic. And it's tragic... Krishnan, everyone who has been killed since October 7th would still be alive if Hamas had not declared war. If Hamas were not fighting this war from densely populated areas, and no one else would be hurt.
Yes, but this didn't start on October 7th
and laid down
in their
its
terms,
arms.
did it?
You're right.
You know, you can say this would not have happened had October the 7th not happened. They would say October the 7th wouldn't have happened had Israel not occupied Gaza in the first place.
I would be very wary of trying in any way to contextualize the atrocities of October 7th.
I'm explaining what they would say. I'm not contextualizing. I'm saying trying to work out when this began is a very confusing game.
And I'm not surprised that the army of terror that practiced acts of pedophilia, necrophilia, and sexual mutilation on October 7th would try to paint a different picture in order to justify its atrocities. There is nothing that can justify or contextualize the barbaric acts of sexual violence that Hamas perpetrated on October 7th that we fear they are perpetrating against the 19 women who are still trapped in its terror dungeons, and which it is telling us that it wants to do again and again.
Do you think the way people are killed in Gaza is also barbaric when they're blown up?
War is a barbaric
When children
business.
get their heads blown off.
Krishnan,
is that barbaric?
Krishnan, war is a barbaric business. But you seem to have me confused with someone who wants this war. We didn't want this war.
No, you're just someone who's defending
this war. Krishnan, we were invaded on October 7th with the bloodiest massacre of Jews since the Holocaust, and we are fighting now so that Hamas can never do that again. Krishnan, I wish I could send Hamas an email or wave a magic wand and make it go away, but that's not going to happen. We have no good choices at the moment. We have a choice to continue fighting to bring back the people who are being tortured in the Hamas terror dungeons and to make sure Hamas can never attack us again as it says it wants to do. Or to lie back and say, come on, hit us, let us have it, because that is what South Africa wants. When South Africa applies to the International Court of Justice for an injunction, it is saying, yes, we know that the Israelis were just attacked with a brutal massacre, but they have no inherent right of self-defense in order to protect themselves. We are asking the court to order Israel to abandon the hostages to the rapists in the terror dungeons.
If the aim of this war is to destroy Hamas, it's going very badly, isn't it?
Not at all. Krishnan, Israel has completely dismantled Hamas's military infrastructure in the northern Gaza Strip. The massive underground terror network that existed, the tunnels inside schools, homes, hospitals, the multi-story complexes in Jabalia, Isa, and Gaza City are no more. We've killed at least 8,000 Hamas terrorists from a total fighting force of 30,000, taken at least
That's
another 1,000.
That's a totally unverified number. You just sort of pluck that out of nowhere.
Do you have a better suggestion?
Well, you're not on the ground to count
because
them,
Krishnan, you say, sorry. You are telling me that is an unverified number, while you are taking the number that Hamas presents for the overall casualties and throwing it out as if it is gospel. That is a completely unverified number. We know that we've killed at least 8,000 Hamas terrorists.
How?
We know we've apprehended because we know that we are targeting the terrorists, and that's how we know how many we have killed. Because we are not launching a campaign of indiscriminate bombing. We are targeting terrorists based on very precise intelligence. That is how we know we've killed 8,000 of them, including half of the commanders of the battalions. And when they were killed and they were replaced, we killed their replacements as well. We have dismantled Hamas's military infrastructure in northern Gaza. It no longer exists. Israel's achievements have, I think, surpassed expectations because 3 months ago you would have said that could not happen. And we did it by taking unprecedented measures to get civilians out of harm's way. By the way, this only shows the absurdity of South Africa's case because we asked civilians to evacuate and get to safety so that they wouldn't be in the middle of a dense urban area. Being shields for Hamas's terror infrastructure. And South Africa then, in a totally Orwellian, Kafkaesque way, says that the fact that Israel is asking civilians to get out of harm's way is somehow evidence of genocidal intent because we're asking them to move to places where they can be safe because we do not
there are no places where people are safe because you also bomb the places where you tell them to move.
Krishnan, we designated a humanitarian zone. By the way, it doesn't matter that the UN didn't cooperate with us in trying to keep civilians protected, that they condemned us for designating a humanitarian zone. We can have that argument another day. Hamas then launched over 100 rockets at our communities, at Tel Aviv and other cities, from inside the humanitarian zone. Not a word from any of the UN organizations that are supposed to care about civilians, about Hamas exploiting a humanitarian zone. Christian, nowhere in Gaza is safe because Hamas has spent 16 years converting Gaza above ground into a large civilian shield for its infrastructure underground. And we want people to be safe.
Just finally, I mean, we have spoken since the beginning of this conflict of what a political settlement might look like and whether the two-state solution is feasible or something that the Israeli government will consider. The ambassador in London has been very clear in interviews on this programme that she cannot envisage a Palestinian state. Is that the position of the Israeli government, that there will not be a Palestinian state?
The position of the Prime Minister is that the Palestinians should have all of the rights and powers to govern themselves, and none of the powers to threaten us. Now, what does that mean? Well, on October 7th, 20 years after Israel withdrew from the Gaza Strip, nearly 20 years, we found out what the risks and threat level are from an Israeli withdrawal in the form of a bloody massacre.
So can you answer that question? I mean, is a Palestinian state on the table or not?
At the moment, we are focusing on destroying Hamas. And we know that whatever form peace is going to take between Israel and Palestinians, and of course we hope that we can reach a politically negotiated settlement, there is no room for Hamas there. And the October 7 massacre will, I think, have given many Israelis food for thought because October 7th changed everything in Israel. It's changed absolutely everything. Will give many Israelis food for thought about whether the West Bank, whether the mountains that overlook Tel Aviv and surround Jerusalem, whether it is possible to cede control to the Palestinians when we know that 82% of them in the West Bank support the Hamas October 7th.
Because what this sounds like is the justification for the reoccupation of Gaza.
Oh, no.
And for not allowing Palestinians back in.
Israel has no intention of permanently occupying Gaza, and we certainly have no intention of displacing them from Gaza. And the Prime Minister has been very clear and very consistent on that point.
Alon Levy, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much.
And the Oscar goes to...
Christian, war is awful. War is awful. We don't want this war.